The topic of high sensitivity, I think, is very much related to a lot of the issues that I've been discussing on this channel when it comes to navigating our way out of authoritarian or controlling or just dysfunctional environments. Because I think what happens is if we're more sensitive, right, we're feeling things more intensely, we're feeling things more deeply, we're sort of picking up on the truth that's happening in our environment, in the people around us, in the systems that we're in, and we're feeling what is not being owned and not being dealt with. And I think that's a pretty amazing ability that certainly I wouldn't trade for anything, but it certainly can create a lot of problems with the people around us, particularly before we become more empowered and healed. Because so many people, perhaps this is the norm, don't want to take accountability. They don't know how to navigate their own pain. And so they will make you the problem for feeling it. And so as more sensitive people, the environment will often make us the problem, which is why highly sensitive children often get scapegoated and labeled as behavior problems. And so often the people that are at the center of these conflicts within authoritarian environments are very sensitive people because they're very much pained by what's going on, which I think has a lot to do with why so often sensitive people are the ones that do a lot of spiritual work, right? And they're kind of leaders in various ways because they are so much more pained by what's going on. Whereas most people, yes, they're also very much suffering in it, but they're more willing often to just kind of go along with things. And you can see this kind of very adversarial dynamic between highly sensitive people and authoritarian environments occurring in dysfunctional or toxic family systems, within the very authoritarian school system that we have, and also within the mental health system a lot of the time. In all of these authoritarian or dysfunctional systems, the highly sensitive person is feeling the truth of what is going on, which makes the people who are in denial angry because that threatens their denial. Briefly, how does this play out in each of these systems? Well, in the family system, in a nutshell, I would say what can happen is the more highly sensitive child is feeling what's going on, right? They're feeling like the underlying emotional dynamics, the underlying emotional difficulties that people aren't dealing with, the ways in which the relationships are dysfunctional that nobody's talking about. And just by feeling the truth of what is happening, they are exposing things in such a way that's very threatening to that system. And if they're willful about it, then the problem is even more extreme. It's a similar dynamic in the school system where, again, the kid is sort of feeling and exposing the truth of how this system really makes a lot of people miserable in a lot of ways, right? The school system, it kind of deadens people. It's anti-creative. It's very painful for many people in lots of ways, right? Kids are pained because they're subject to all of this evaluation and surveillance. And so because they're feeling this, or God forbid, they don't put up with it, they become labeled as behavior problems and they face the authoritarian backlash that system produces. And a similar but unique and very interesting dynamic can also occur when a highly sensitive person enters into the mental health system, like therapy, for example, where what can happen is they basically subvert the entire premise of what is happening and sort of kind of expose a lot of the inadequacies and limitations of that system. So, for example, in therapy, the mental health professional is presumed to be the expert. They're in the higher position within that hierarchy, right? They are seen as being more wise, as being healthier, as having more knowledge and wisdom of all of these different things. But the highly sensitive person is probably much more attuned than the mental health professional. They might be a lot more, they might have a lot more emotional depth. They might be a lot more in touch with the truth within themselves, and also have a lot more intuition, or a lot more accurate intuition about other people. And so they basically subvert the premise of what's going on, because they are actually kind of, perhaps in a lot of ways, the more aware person within that relationship. And so that can make these mental health professionals, who are probably still very dissociated, maybe they're not very far along on their sort of integration work of becoming like more healed and more whole. They are basically threatening that whole sort of premise. And so the mental health professional might psychopathologize them, and some really scary dynamics can happen. And this is especially a problem because we're going in there not really fully trusting ourselves, right? As more sensitive people, we're entering in there because, probably ultimately because we want to find somebody who can help us develop more self-trust, somebody who can actually understand this stuff. Maybe somebody who's actually kind of like us in this way, but actually further along on the journey. But instead we're with somebody who's actually maybe less aware and less healthy. And so I just learned to trust myself more and trust my intuition a lot more about these kind of people that I encounter, and to not put people on a pedestal who my gut tells me are actually less aware and less healed than I am. Now, as we start to heal, we start to recover our inner compass and our gut feelings that we basically had to disown in order to get along in these environments in which, unhealed and wounded and sometimes toxic people had power over us. And so we start to see these systems more clearly, and we start to reclaim our ability to read other people more deeply and feel more deeply into the truth of things. And we start to really reclaim and see all of the positive aspects of ourselves that we had to disown in order to get along in these environments, and very positive aspects of ourselves that probably, almost certainly, not everybody in that environment has, because, or at least not to the same degree, because most people kind of just go along with things. And so this all takes time, right? It takes time to reclaim all of this, to heal all of these things. And it's something that can happen, there can be like relatively rapid transformation if we're very dedicated to it. But either way, it takes time, it takes a lot of work. Now, one of the big pitfalls in all of this relates to the issue of spiritual ego. And this is what I really wanted to touch on in this video. Spiritual ego is the problem where people who are starting to do this work, right? They're doing this kind of spiritual work or personal growth work or like self-healing work or whatever you want to call it, where they're really like integrating all their deeper traumas and things like that. It's where then they start to become really inflated, and they think they're really amazing, and they can be very grandiose. And it basically becomes a way for them to avoid further pain. It becomes a way for them to avoid doing their remaining integration work, which is understandable because it's very difficult. This is an issue that I've talked quite a lot about on Twitter, where these people can get into these roles where they might be therapists, or they might be like coaches of some kind, or spiritual people, or whatever it may be. And they kind of start to like hold themselves above you, and they can really lack a lot of self-awareness because they're not continuing to do that self-awareness work. And ultimately, they can sort of perpetuate the dynamics of dehumanization that wounded them. And this can be a potential pitfall for highly sensitive people, because we probably do have quite a lot of pain, and also we may be doing this work. And the other thing is that nobody who is on this kind of path of like spiritual growth or whatever you want to call that is completely free of this, because we are bringing these things into form, right? Like we're bringing words to these issues. We're really doing something about them because it's important. And so our ego is going to be involved in the process every step of the way. And I don't think that that's inherently a bad thing, really, right? Because it's like, where is the bar, right? The bar for us should not be Gandhi or Jesus. The bar for us should be the status quo of the environment. And so I would say that this isn't a bad thing. The key is just about, are we continuing to stay humble by doing our integration work, by really like feeling all of our pain, looking at it, understanding it more, studying it, and dealing with it. And the more of that we do, the better. But there is another side of this, which is something that I've only come to fully understand in more recent years. And it's something that I wish I'd understood earlier, which is that we may think, or we may be led by others to believe, that we have a bigger problem with spiritual ego than we really do. And really worrying about it could be something that actually blocks us from stepping further into our own awareness and our own empowerment. One of the reasons this can happen is that this can be, on some level, something that the very sort of wounded and unhealed people in our earlier environments can project onto us as a way of kind of limiting our own development, because they feel threatened by it. So they might be like, oh, you think you're better than everybody else, or like, oh, you think you're so spiritual. And so that isn't really like probably an accurate reflection of our issues, or it may be a partially accurate reflection, or it may be not accurate at all, but it's something that's really coming from their own insecurity that is being surfaced by your presence and your awareness. And so I think it's really important to just stay in this kind of more grounded sort of middle path where where on the one hand, we aren't letting ourselves get really inflated and grandiose, and we are sort of preventing ourselves from doing that by staying grounded, by looking at all the difficult things within ourselves, by, studying how we're showing up in life, but then also really, really allowing ourselves to develop a lot more confidence and allowing ourselves to really see fully who we are, how that relates to the environment, how that's different, often in a good way, what our positive differences are, and really like having a lot of fire behind that, because I think that is a really good thing, right? To have a lot of passion behind that, a lot of fire behind that, and develop a lot of confidence and empowerment with that. And I would say that this is not only good for us, but it's also good for the world on some level, right? It's like, by looking at these things, by dealing with these things, by sort of empowering our different awareness, we sort of, I think, help to kind of ratchet up the human condition in our own like real life grounded way, because we're breaking cycles and we're bringing more truth to things. So this is kind of my sort of point here on highly sensitive people and spiritual ego. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Please also share this video with anybody who you think might enjoy it and might find it helpful. Please also let me know in the comments if there is something that you'd like me to make a video on in the future. Thank you for watching this, and I look forward to having you next time.